Cohort retention is not the only way to calculate your retention in a recurring revenue business. Welcome to today's edition of SaaS Metrics School. So, I would like to address some of those social media posts that you see that say cohort retention is the only method to calculate retention, which is, in my opinion, bogus. So, let's find out why. So, first, what are the three retention calculations that we need in our recurring revenue business? And again, this could be a SaaS business, this could be telecom. I hear of other people in other industries reach out to me and say, "Hey, Ben, actually, your metrics can apply to us because we have this recurring revenue business where we charge a monthly something." So, the three retention calculations. First, we need customer retention. I call that logo retention. It could be user retention. It's that entity, it's on an entity basis. Then we have gross revenue retention. Again, gross revenue retention maxes out 100%, and that is subtracting churn and contraction to get our gross revenue retention. Then we have net revenue retention, which builds upon GRR, where now we get credit for expansion revenue, no new logo revenue, expansion revenue, which hopefully offsets downgrade or contraction in churn. And we want that number above 100%. Now, what's a great number? I've addressed that in other episodes, but we'll talk about that another time for revenue retention benchmarks. But those are the three methods of retention that we're going to calculate for our recurring revenue business. Now, cohort retention. You'll see this in social media posts. Cohort is the only way to do it, which it is not the only way to calculate retention or the best method for retention analysis. So cohort retention looks at customers by acquisition date. That's the popular common cohort retention. So if I acquired 10 customers in January, I'm going to look a year later and or just month by month, and how many customers do I keep from that same cohort? So if the next month I have 10, maybe 9, and we can also do this on a dollar basis, on a monetary basis. So that's cohort retention, looking at that same set. Now we'll talk about and then how we can get more advanced there. So that's cohort retention. Now, what about aggregate revenue retention? So that looks at our entire customer base, that total customer population, and what's happening in our MRR waterfall. So new, expansion, contraction, churn, using those layers of MRR, and then we can calculate those retention calculations. I've got a retention template for that in my academy and teach that in my SaaS Metrics Foundation course. So that's aggregate retention. Now, next step, segmentation. So if we, classic example, say we go after enterprise customers, then we went down market, we were SMB, so we have an enterprise product that's 100K a year and SMB product that's $5,000 a year. We don't want to commingle those retention schedules together. It would mean nothing to us. We need to then segment our customer base, maybe based on those pricing plans, and calculate retention on each of those in those customer sets. So that's segmentation. So that's really important. Of course, there's so many different ways you can segment your base by ICP, by geo, pricing plan, other metadata that attaches to those customers, often called firmographics. Now, back to cohort retention. I mentioned we can get advanced there. Of course, the month acquisition, but we can also do the source of acquisition. Maybe that cohort was acquired through paid ads. Maybe this one was from organic SEO inbound. Maybe this was from a webinar. So we can track retention. That becomes even more powerful to see what customers, what sources stay with us. So that's an overview of retention. Again, cohort, not the only way to do this. And also, well, why it's not the only way? Because let's say we're targeting mid-market enterprise customers. I realize my hands are just going all over the place today if you're watching the video. If we only acquire, say, 2 customers a month, those 2 enterprise customers, what good is it doing? Let's just say 3. We acquired 3 in January, and a year from now, if a year from January, we only have 2. We're at 66% retention. Boy, that's a bad number. I don't want to show that to anybody. That's just not a big enough data set to have validity in that calculation. Maybe next step, we'd have to bundle it by quarter. Maybe we get 10 customers, enterprise customers in the quarter. Okay, that's getting better. But that's why I say cohort is not the only way to do it, because if we're not acquiring a volume of customers, that small data set is really not going to provide much in the way of interpreting those retention metrics. Maybe we can bundle it by quarter if we've been in business a long time, maybe by year, then that may be possible. Now, if you're self-service SaaS or PLG motion acquiring 10, 20, 30, 100,000 users a month, then yes, there's a big enough data set. And I definitely recommend cohort retention when you have thousands of users, a customer base with thousands, and acquiring multiple customers or users a month, then the data set's big enough. If I acquire 50 customers in January and then look a year from now or month by month, yeah, that's enough data flowing through there. So again, we can't believe everything that we read in social media. This is just from my experience, frontline, helping hundreds of SaaS companies. A little bit about core retention. Of course, on my blog at thesaascfo.com, I have a bunch of posts on retention and also my retention template, which works like magic. And also show notes, join my SaaS community for events, training, etc. Would love to see you in there. So hope you got value out of today's episode of SaaS Metric School.